Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Seth. I'm the story curator for Musing, and welcome to the third installment in the series. As you know, each Musing event has its own theme, and tonight's theme is life and death. Stories about starts and stops, beginnings and endings, renewal and letting go. And you are in for a real treat tonight. Over the past 10 weeks, it's been my pleasure to work with the 6 storytellers you will be hearing from tonight. Their stories are sure to touch your heart, make you laugh even, and maybe even inspire you to get up in front of 100 strangers someday and tell your own story. It could happen, right? It could happen. Sure. So just so you know, all of our Musing event stories are true, no fiction. So again, the stories you will be hearing tonight are true and told as remembered by the very people who lived them. Just a couple of housekeeping things. If you would please be sure to silence your cell phones. That would be great. The last thing we want is for the Lone Ranger theme to go off during one of these very touching stories you're about to hear tonight. And also, if you have to get up at all during the show, there's no intermission. Please just go up the center aisle as quietly as possible, okay? All right, let's begin. Our first storyteller is Vice President of Human Resources for Lutheran Family Services. He is also on the board for the ACLU of Nebraska, as well as the Alzheimer's Association of Nebraska. He is a husband, he is a proud dad dog, and just an all-around swell guy. Please welcome to the microphone, Mr. Ralph Kellogg.
So tonight I want to share with you a story about a person who changed my life, a person that I still think of to this day, my best friend Tommy. But before I tell you about Tommy, I need to tell you about the kid I was prior to meeting Tommy. So I knew growing up very early on that I was not like other kids, especially other boys. I played with dolls. I liked to read. I loved art. I liked music. I did play with other kids in the neighborhood, other girls primarily, but not the girls who played sports because they scared me. I played with the girls who liked jacks and house and board games, basically anything that would ensure that I could get involved but not get dirty. I was up for doing anything along those lines. I also loved animals, especially dogs. And I had a lot of dogs growing up, a lot of pets growing up, but one in particular was a favorite of mine. His name was Napoleon, and he was a little black toy French poodle. Now, one of my loves also was cinema, movies, and glamour, and I loved the way that movies would incorporate fashion and modeling. So if you think of movies like Mahogany with Diana Ross or The Eyes of Laura Mars with Faye Dunaway, I loved how fashion would be incorporated almost like a character. Well, I didn't know anyone in Hollywood. I didn't know any models, and I had to improvise. And this is where my little dog comes in. So every week I would give Napoleon a bath, not because Napoleon was dirty, not because he especially enjoyed being in the water, but I had developed a beauty ritual with him. So I would bathe him, and then I would take him out of the tub, and I would gingerly dry him off, leaving some moisture in his ears. I would then tap his ears ever so lightly, and then I would put heavy gel mousse in his ears. I would tease them up a little bit, and then I would turn the hairdryer on so the ears would blow, so it would remind you of a model with the fan on them. And then I would do this, like we were having a fashion show. If all of the other things that I liked in my life hadn't given a clue to anybody observing me that I was gay, the beauty ritual that I subjected this poor dog to on a weekly basis was like a neon sign that could be seen from space. Suffice it to say, I got picked on a lot. I got bullied. Middle school was hell on earth. faggot, homo, queer, gay, sissy. I heard these words every day of my life in middle school, and I accepted it. There was no one to go to. There was no one to ask for help. Back in the time when I grew up, you just dealt with it. Gym class was hell on earth because boys, at least the boys that I knew in middle school, this is where young testosterone is on display and people are jockeying for position. I would do anything I could to get out of gym class. Shirts versus skins, the damn climbing rope that I could never climb, dodgeball, which was like some sort of combat sport. I didn't want anything to do with it. One day I was standing in the lunch line and I was behind two older girls. They were in 8th grade. And I overheard one tell the other, well, I got out of gym class because I told the teacher I had cramps. I didn't know what cramps were, and I assumed that she meant stomach cramps. And I thought, I've got it. So the next time I had gym class, I decided I was going to share this bit of wisdom with my gym teacher. I walked up to him and I said, I can't suit up today. And he said, why? And I boldly said, because I have cramps. He looked at me and I looked at him, and he didn't ask for an explanation and I didn't offer one. And so we sort of went our separate ways, but he did let me out of gym class. I did use that excuse a few more times, and I was let out of gym a few more times, and I figured it's small victories at this point. High school got better for me. A lot of the boys who bullied me went to different schools. Some dropped out. Some just got absorbed in the 1,500 students that attended the high school that I went to. One thing I did when I went to high school was join ROTC. And I joined ROTC for 3 reasons. One, a friend of mine dared me. The other reason, it would serve as a PE credit. I didn't have to take gym, and I was all about doing that. And the third reason was I figured if Goldie Hawn could survive plating a soldier in Private Benjamin for 2 hours, then I could survive a year in ROTC. What I didn't know when I joined ROTC was how much I loved it, or how much I would love it. I loved everything about it. It was fantastic. I loved the formality. I loved the structure. I loved learning new things about myself. The cool thing about ROTC is when you did things really well, they gave you ribbons that went on your jacket. If you did things extremely well, you got medals. And if you shined them with a little bit of Brasso, they picked up the sun, and it was like having bling before bling was a thing. I felt pretty, so I liked it. I liked wearing them. ROTC is also where I would meet my best friend, Tommy. And Tommy was a sophomore when I met him. And he was one of those individuals that oozed charisma. Everybody loved him. Everybody. Teachers loved him, students loved him, administrators loved him. Everybody gravitated toward him. And to be in his orbit and to be accepted or acknowledged by him was something really special. When I think back of Tommy, I always conjure up an image of Michael J. Fox in Back to the Future because Tommy looked like Michael J. Fox. He was slight of frame. He had a little bit of a tan, dimples, really, really pretty brown eyes that had little gold flecks in them, so if the sun hit his face just right, it would remind you of my ROTC medals, but they would shine up like a little bit of amber. They were just gorgeous. And he smiled with his eyes. When he was happy, his face lit up and he smiled with his eyes, and it was just something to behold. Tommy also had something that I didn't have as well. He had really cool hair. The part down the middle, feather back thing that everyone had back in the day, that was something that I really wanted because I did not have cool hair. At the time, my hair looked like a cross section between Richard Simmons, a Chia Pet, and the kid from Napoleon Dynamite. It was not good. It was not good. But he became aware of me and I became aware of him. I was excelling in the program, and as an upperclassman, he was looking for individuals who would be moving up through the program. And so the following year, when I was a sophomore and he was a junior, we were in the same class. And I can't tell you the moment or the day, but it was like we had always been friends. We got each other. We got each other. And our friendship instantly took off. And he knew what people said about me or had said about me. Faggot, homo, queer. He heard all of those things and he didn't care. He just wanted to be my friend. He didn't ask me to change or behave differently. He didn't tell me what to say or what not to say. He just was there and he was my friend. And to have that kind of connection with a male in my life when I hadn't had one with a male figure before, friend or otherwise, was a gift that I cannot fully articulate to this day. It was so special and meant so much to me, and it filled a void I didn't know I had. So we go through the fall and we go into the winter, and we have a great friendship. All of a sudden, I'm popular because of Tommy. I meet people. I get invited to sit at the cool kids table. I am going to parties now. To quote a great cinematic figure, Gretchen Wieners from the best movie ever, Mean Girls, I was living a fetch life. So flash forward to the spring of 1985. It's May, and Tommy said, let's go to senior ditch day. I wasn't a senior and I didn't ditch, but okay, sounded like fun. So Thursday, May 9th, 1985, my mom dropped me off at the front of the high school. I promptly walked in the front door, and walked right out the back door to meet Tommy. And I got into Tommy's girlfriend's car. She was there, as well as her best friend, and we got into a white Mustang, and we drove her to his house to change clothes because we were going to go to the lake. So we go to his house, we change clothes, we get back into the car, and I notice in the car there's a fifth of Jack Daniels. Bottle wasn't there before, and I didn't think anything of it. He knew everybody knew him. For all I know, elves brought it. I didn't really think about it. He dared me once we got on the road to take a drink of Jack Daniels. Like then, just like now, I'm a lightweight. I took a big gulp of it, promptly swallowed it, and fell asleep. We're on the road for about an hour. And once the hour passes, we're at Paradise Lake, which is about 50 miles away from Kansas City. It was so hot that day. It wasn't even the heat of the day yet, and I just remember it being so hot. We get out of the car, there's no one there. There's no lifeguards, there's no guards, there's no one. It's the four of us and a lake. We skip some stones across the lake, we walk around for a little bit, and Tommy sees a rowboat. And he says, let's get in the rowboat and row out to this little mound that had formed in the middle of the lake. I'd call it an island, but that would be doing a disservice to islands. It was just like this little mound. So we pile all of our stuff and we get into the rowboat, and I'm not athletically inclined. I think that we all know that by now. And the girls certainly couldn't do it. So Tommy rowed us out to this little island. We take all of our stuff out, we set it down, we turn the radio on, the alcohol comes out, and he says, well, I'm gonna go swimming. I didn't think anything of it. I said, okay. So he went into the water and started swimming, and I had turned my back to him by this time. I wasn't really watching what he was doing. And a few minutes had passed, and I still had my back to him, and I hear, hey, Ralph, aren't you gonna save me? and I turned around, and I noticed that he was a little way from the shore, but I didn't think anything of it. It didn't dawn on me that this could be a dangerous situation. Turned back around, was doing whatever it was I was doing, and then he yelled out again. He said, "Hey, Ralph, aren't you going to save me?" And this time when I turned around, he was probably 30 to 40 feet away from the little island that we were on. Enough that I started thinking, this is not good. This is bad. So I said, "Yes, Tommy, stay where you are. I'm going to come and get you." I got in the rowboat. I couldn't maneuver the rowboat. I started going in circles. I pushed the rowboat back up to the little island thing, and I'm standing there looking, and he's swam farther out by this time. And he kept looking at me, and he was doing sort of this Marco Polo thing where he would go under the water and come up and go under the water and come up. And so he did this a few times, and by this time the girls are crying, I'm crying. This Whitney Houston song was on the radio called "How Will I Know," and I'm hearing this song in the back of my mind, and he's going under and he's coming up. And then he looked at me one more time and he said, "Hey, Ralph, don't you love me? Aren't you going to save me?" And after he said that, his body arched and his eyes rolled back and he went under and he didn't come back up. I don't remember how we got off the island. I remember immediately after he didn't come back up, trying to tidy up. I didn't want to get in trouble. I threw the liquor out that was still there. I threw the bottle in the water. I don't remember how we got off the island and got back to shore. I remember someone telling my mom, well, we found the body. And I heard that before we left. The funeral was the next week, and everyone in ROTC was asked to wear black armbands as a show of mourning. I was asked to give a eulogy. And I was standing in front of what felt like the entire school, giving a eulogy at 15 years old for my best friend, crying so much that I couldn't read what I wrote. At the graveside, we were getting situated, and I remember I stepped in mud, a lot of mud, and the rifle team had been asked to give a 21-gun salute as a show of respect for Tommy. And when I stepped in the mud, and as the rifle team was getting set up, I thought, I'm gonna have to really clean my shoes off for the next inspection. I can't go with muddy shoes. And the rifle started. And after every shot, I would jump just a little, even though I knew it was coming. When the final shot happened, everyone begins to disperse and leave, and I thought, well, that's it, isn't it? That's it. He's gone, and people go on with their lives, and we get back to business as usual, because there are important things to tend to, like shining shoes. I don't remember a lot of the rest of the next few weeks or few months. School let out, summer vacation started. I remember being crushed under this weight of grief that I couldn't get out of. I couldn't see myself happy. And people were telling me, you need to get over this, you need to move on. Tommy wouldn't want you to be upset, he'd want you to get on with your life. And I'm thinking, how the hell would you know what Tommy would want? It's not like he's here to ask. How would you really know what he wants? And I remember one Sunday afternoon, I was alone in my house, and this wall of grief hit me, and I started to cry. And I remember asking whoever was listening, God or whomever, when this would end, because I couldn't take much more of it. It was crushing. And it's hard to describe the weight and the enormity of the grief that I felt. And I would have killed myself. I honestly know this, I would have killed myself, but I remember standing at his graveside, promising him that I would accomplish all the things that we had talked about. I'd go to college, I'd have a great life, I'd do something big. I didn't know what big meant, but I would do something big. And so I ask again, when will this end? When will this grief go? I can't take much more of this. And suddenly the realization came to me that I didn't love Tommy. I was in love with Tommy. Tommy was my first love. He was the first person that I ever gave my heart to, and I didn't know it. And so I sat with that, and I realized there was no one I could tell. I couldn't tell anybody about why this was so difficult for me to get through. But I knew then, because I had named it and I understood it, that I could begin to heal from it. Almost a year after his death, I had a dream about Tommy, and I had never dreamed about Tommy from the time that he died up until the time I had this dream. And in this dream, we're fighting about something, I don't remember what, but toward the end of it, he put his arm around my shoulder and he hugged me. And then he got on a motorcycle, which he hadn't owned when I knew him, and drove away. I don't know if he was a member of the Safety First Club because I didn't see a helmet, but I'm assuming that there was one there, I just missed it. And I woke up from the dream, and because it was so real, I thought, oh, he's here. He's here, he's back. And then it hit me that, no, you had a dream, and he's not here. He's still gone. And before the grief washed over me, I thought, he hugged me. He hugged me. And why that was significant to me is because I had always wondered if I had made an impact on his life the way that he had made on mine. If he had loved me or if I had added value to his life. And in that moment, I knew that I had, because he loved me enough to come back and say goodbye. I will always be grateful for Tommy. I will be grateful for every second of every minute of every day I spent with him. His exit from my life was based in tragedy, but he helped me begin my life again through love and compassion and friendship, a friendship that I carry in my heart to this day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that, Ralph. Thank you. Well, our next storyteller, when he's not busy trying to solve the world's problems with his commentaries on Becca's Beat, on Fox 42, he is selling real estate with the Better Homes and Gardens Good Life Group, or he's playing drums, or he's enjoying a single malt scotch with a friend. Please welcome to the stage, Mr. Tom Becka.
Life and death. The argument could be made that my father's life began the day that 2,403 Americans died. That was the day the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. You see, prior to that time, my dad was a high school student, and from what I've been told, not a very good student. He was a happy-go-lucky guy that told bad jokes and would talk to anybody that would listen. But he didn't study, he didn't apply himself. More than once, the nuns at St. Procop's Catholic High School in Cleveland, Ohio, told my father that he was not living up to his potential. Well, the day after, the day that will live in infamy, my 17-year-old father lied about his age and he joined the military. My dad was real proud of his time in the service, but he never really talked about it much. He came home, he had some medals, he had some souvenirs like German belt buckles and pocket knives with a Nazi insignia that he kept hidden in a dresser drawer. But if you ask my dad what he did in the war, he said, I was just a cook. I just peeled potatoes. It wasn't until after he died I learned that he fought in the Battle of the Bulge. and helped retrieve bodies in a Nazi concentration camp. Germans surrendered. My dad comes home. War changes a person, and while some men come back just a broken shell of their former self, my dad came back with the knowledge that life is precious and time is short. The old Ray Becka was gone, but now he was focused, he was dedicated, he was driven. He got a job in a butcher shop, used the GI Bill to get his high school diploma and further his education. During this time, he met my mom, fell in love, got married, and had plans to raise a family. But he knew that he couldn't raise a family and keep him the way that he wanted with a butcher's salary, so at night he took night classes to learn to be an insurance salesman. He got his license and became an insurance salesman for Mutual Omaha. Yeah, turned in his apron and meat cleaver for an attaché case and a tie. One career was over, and another one began. Yeah, but the family didn't start right away. My parents had been married 8 years before I was born. Had a sister that was born a year later and a brother 2 years after that. My dad worked hard to support this growing family. He used the GI Bill to buy a modest home there in Cleveland. And he worked hard. He worked a lot. And the more he worked, the better he got in his sales. And soon he started winning sales competitions. One day he won a sales competition where he won a gold engraved watch, an old STEM watch, with a ring that told the world that he was a member of the President's Club. Oh, my dad was proud of that watch and ring. And every night when he came home, he would take off the ring and wrap it around the watch band, and he'd put the watch and ring on the living room end table. You knew that Dad was home when you saw the watch and ring on the living room end table. And Dad wasn't home that much because he's working real hard. You know, my dad, that watch and ring was a sense of his pride, a sense of accomplishment. But to me, that watch and ring represented my father. My father that wasn't home that much. Yeah, as I said, he worked real hard. He got promoted. Soon we found ourselves leaving that lower middle class home in Cleveland for the upper middle class suburbs of Columbus, Ohio. I went from being a kid that played hide and go seek and kicked the can in the streets to going to organized little league games and tennis lessons. Yeah, I was a street kid that had to learn a whole new lifestyle. But, yeah, you know, the watch and the ring were still there. That was the one constant. Only now, the watch and the ring were not put on the living room end table, but on the dining room credenza. Yeah, soon my dad got tired of the corporate world and decided to venture out on his own, start his own company as a financial planner. He got a partner, and they started their own company. Worked real hard and tried to get things going. About the time that this was all going on, technology improved, and my dad got one of the newfangled battery-operated watches. And the old watch was just put in a drawer. But I didn't care so much because I was a teenager now, and the watch and ring no longer held that much attention to me. I didn't care. But yeah, things didn't work out with my dad and his partner. Partner wasn't all that ethical. Made promises he couldn't keep. Well, so the business went south. We moved west to Omaha, Nebraska. Yeah, another new beginning. I grew up, moved out, lived in a lot of different places, lived in Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico, Georgia, Kansas, a few other places. But I always made it back home to Omaha because Omaha was home. Only now I was a man in my 40s and my parents were well into their senior years. Mom passed away and Dad was getting old. Wound up in the hospital. and we knew the end was imminent. I don't remember how or where, but I found the old watch and ring, and I put it on. And it was every once in a while I'd wind it up and wear it, and it'd stop a time or two every day, and I'd have to rewind it and set the time. It was a hassle, but a small price to pay for the comfort the watch and ring once again provided. Dad was in hospice now, and my sister, brother, and I took turns staying in the room with him as his breathing became more and more shallow. I was in the room, but my father's breathing stopped. As I left the hospital, my mind was a blur. I was in a daze. All the memories of my childhood came flashing back to me, the good and the bad. I went to the nursing home where my dad spent the last years of his life and walked into the empty room. I had to get a suit for his burial. As I walked in, one of the nurses asked me how my dad was doing. I told her that he'd passed away. She offered her condolences. You see, my dad was a favorite with the nurses and the attendants there at the nursing home because even though his body was given out, his mind was still sharp. He was still that guy that told bad jokes and talked to anyone that would listen. He rarely complained. The nurses and the attendants loved him. The nurse was sad. She asked me when my dad died. I said, about an hour ago. I can't imagine the look on my face when I noticed that the watch had stopped. It stopped at 7:20, the time of my father's passing. Now, I can be a cynical person, no doubt about that, and I can rationalize that, well, hey, the watch was stopping once or twice a day anyway. And you might be right if you think it was just a coincidence that it stopped at 7:20. But in my mind, it was my dad telling me that this part of his existence was over, and he is on his way to another new beginning. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom. Thank you. Very well done. All right, our next storyteller. At 77 years young, this retired mental health rehabilitation specialist is also a wife, a mother, a friend, and an artist with a studio at Hot Shops, which I encourage you to go check out because her artwork is amazing. Please welcome to the stage, Maureen Mangan.
So. Hello, everyone. My story begins when I was born in 1945. I was number 4 of 6. I had siblings. Well, I was number 4 of 6, and then 2 more sisters came along after that. My mother tells me that when I was about 13 months old. She told me this when I was older, when I could understand maybe. And she said, you were diagnosed with polio at age 13 months. And she said it was horrific. She said I had horrible pain. I had fever. I couldn't walk anymore. And I guess I was kept at home only because my lungs were okay. So she tells me it was like an apology. She said, you know, I was just so busy. I had those other children. She said, I did the best I could to care for you. She said, nothing would help your pain. And there was no medicine at that time for a child that age. So she tells me I left you. You had to be in your crib alone. And she said you would wrap your arms around yourself and curl into a fetal position, and you would moan and cry sometimes for hours before I could go to sleep. Now, learning this and looking back, I think at this very young age, I learned how to hold my pain inside because nobody could help me. So I survive. I don't remember any of that. I do remember being bullied by my two older brothers, and no one would come to my rescue. And it was at that time, and I think I was about 4 years old, that I created an imaginary friend that I named Rocky Toady. Don't know where that came from, but I confided all my troubles to him. So now I'm of school age. I don't have a lot of confidence in myself. My kindergarten wrote it actually on my report card. And somehow I got through. I went to all Catholic schools. I stayed the good little girl because I was afraid if I challenged somebody or if I didn't do what I was told, I was going to be in a situation and I did not know how to stick up for myself. So life goes on. I mean, I go to all Catholic schools. I have a lot of friends. I get good grades, but I remain the good little girl and I do everything I am told. So now I'm a senior at Creighton University. I become engaged to a gentleman that's a friend of my brother's, and he is in his second year of law school. And, all I wanted to do was get married and have a family. So I accepted this proposal. I did have a lot of concerns about it, which I would take home to my mom, and she convinced me, no, he's a good catch, you marry him, everything will work out, because that's what marriage is all about. You work everything out. So I married him. We had 4 children in 6 years, and then we had another one come along about 3 years after that. Now, I loved being a mother. I was a very busy mother. Being a wife kept becoming more challenging. One time I went home, I don't know what was going on, we had a fight, I was just so upset. And I went home and I talked to my mom and I was crying. And she says, well, you gotta, I said, no, I don't feel like it's working. I don't know what to do. He's right and I'm wrong. Nothing ever gets settled. He's a lawyer. He argues to win. And so I'm like, well, then she gives me some advice. Her advice to me about this was, okay, if that's the case, then you go home and you iron and you keep ironing until it's your fault. I never ironed again in my whole life. I went home. I thought, but what I did do was probably just as bad. We would have these arguments. We wouldn't speak for like 3 or 4 days. I would go to him. I would say, I'm sorry, not knowing what I was sorry for. He would look at me and he would say, don't say you're sorry, just never do it again. And I thought, oh dear. So I have to tell you all at this time, it wasn't all bad. I mean, I had 5 lovely children. As a family, we created many, many good memories together. And so this was like one evening, it's like I'm about maybe 37 years old, and the kids have all come home from school, and I'm in the kitchen thinking, okay, what am I going to make for dinner? And that whole day I had spent when the kids were in school, I had made this giant wreath for our church. And that was one thing I had done to help myself, was I activated my creative talents. And I sometimes the kids would come with me. I go on back roads and I would pick native plants and grasses, and I would bring them home, and I would make dried flower arrangements. I'd hang them upside down so they could dry, squirt them with a little shellac, and dried flower arrangements and a lot of different wreaths. So this particular day, I had this giant one that was going in the social hall for the church, and I was just so proud of it. I had finished. But I'm always looking for some special something to embellish it with. And a lot of times my kids would come up with stuff. So on this particular evening, I'm in the kitchen. It's about 5 o'clock, and my son, my oldest son, comes in from the backyard, and he's got his hands like this. And he goes, "Boy, do I have a surprise for you, Mom." And he goes, "I know what you're going to do with it." He pointed to the wreath. And he says, "The only reason I'm giving you this is because it was down on the ground, it can't fly, and our dogs are going to kill it." He opens up his hands. I've never seen anything like this before. It was this huge butterfly moth. It had beautiful color, intense designs like all over its wings. I had no idea what it was, but my God, thank you. This is going to be perfect for my wreath. So for the time being, I had a large terrarium that was sitting on the dining room table, the kitchen table. And so we put the moth, it couldn't fly, so we put it inside the terrarium and went about our day, finished. The next morning, I'm the first one downstairs, and I look in this terrarium, and this creature had laid tons of eggs all over the plants. And it's like, oh my God, what is this? Now it's a mom. How am I going to preserve it for my wreath? So the kids all went to school. They thought it was really cool, but they were in a hurry. So I didn't have much to do that day, so I pulled out all my encyclopedias, and I started researching. I got to find out more about this. So I discover that it is a giant Cecropia moth. It flies at night, so they're very rare to see. The lifespan is only like 5 to 10 days, and the female lays her eggs and she dies. So now, maybe I can help it die. So the kids all come home, and I tell them everything. I tell them what I find out, and I said, I say, I know this is a gift for that wreath. I know, I'm obsessed with it. So they go, "Well, how are you going to help it die?" And I said, "Well, I have this poison spray, and if there's a flying hornet or a wasp or something, one spray, it's dead, it's on the ground." So I said, it's going to be very quick. She's dying. You suffer when you die. And they're a little leery about this, but they go, "All right, go ahead." So I spray, one spray, and oh my God, this creature just starts going crazy, banging its wings up against the terrarium, up against the glass. I spray and I spray and I spray, and it's like, what have I done? It will not die before its time. My son comes and gets it, takes it outside, digs a grave, buries the moth, empties the caterpillars or the eggs, and throws the terrarium away, comes back in, and I'm absolutely a mess. I just didn't mean to do that, and I'm apologizing to him because I did that right in front of him. And all I could think of was, I told him, I said, "I feel like I've committed this sin, and I just want you to know that I'm going to go visit Father Minelli tomorrow. He was our pastor and our good friend, and I'm going to confession." So I go see him the next morning, and he's very good. He listens to my story in awe. And then he looks at me and tells me, "Maureen, you have to forgive yourself. But I have this feeling that you are going to learn something very important about yourself from this event. And I go, okay, I felt a little better. Well, guess what? He was right. It took a couple years, but he was right. I'm in a class a graduate class at Creighton University with Father Lubers. The title of the class is the Psychology of Creativity and Cosmic Consciousness. So I love this class. I'm drawn mostly to Carl Jung, and I learn about how we're all connected to the universe. And then I came across this quote, and it said, "You can become one with the observed." And I thought, oh my God, that's it. I am one with that moth I destroyed a couple years ago. I'm trapped in my marriage. I'm suffocating. I feel like I'm dying. I want to be free. So I couldn't even say the word divorce. But as soon as I could get an appointment, I started seeing a Jungian therapist. My younger sister, Kevin, became my confidant. And she lived close to me, and she and I would go for these long walks every day that weather permitted. And they were so important to me because I would share everything with her. I would cry, I'd tell her my pain, I'd tell her what's going on, I'd share with my therapy. But I just, I couldn't even say the name. I couldn't even use the word divorce. I called it the D word. So after that, we were going for a walk this one day, and I don't know how long we've been doing this, probably almost a year. So one day we're on this walk, and it's winter. It's like February, but it's a beautiful day. And the sun's out, and we're walking. There's lots of dead branches all over the ground. And I spotted this branch, and I pick it up, and it was a dead cottonwood branch, but it had looked like a dried up cocoon on it. And I thought, oh, this is good for me. This is a reminder of what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to set myself free. So fast forward it was at least a couple months, because it was later April. And again, I'm in my kitchen, and this time it's very late. I'm cooking for a Creighton Prep fundraising event. And I finish it's about 1 o'clock, 1:30 in the morning. And I walk around to turn out the lights. And I walk into the dining room where I have placed this cottonwood branch it was a display of all these sticks I had picked up. It was a decorative stick arrangement. But I walk in and I look, and I think I can cuss. I couldn't believe it. Shit. I go up, this giant Cecropia moth has erupted from what I thought was this dried up cocoon. I couldn't believe it. I call my sister, you gotta get over here, bring your camera. I go upstairs and I wake up the kids and I bring them all downstairs. And my youngest son, he goes, Mom, this is a miracle. And I said, well, it is a miracle. And guess what we're gonna do with this one? We're gonna set it free. So she took some pictures, and we all went out on the deck, and I anchored it. I made sure it was safe. I anchored it in another live tree branch that was kind of overhanging the deck. And everybody wishes them well, goodbye, good journey. The kids come in and go to sleep. My sister stays for just a little bit, and I look at her and I say, Kevin, this is what I needed to start the legal work for my divorce. And I used the word. I said the word for the first time, divorce. So I followed through. It took over 2 years to get final. It was finalized in 1992. I was like, I didn't have any regrets because I had my beautiful family. I got a job and started earning my own money. My dad helped me get a house. The kids were very supportive of me all the way through this. So I remained single for, I think it was like 18 years. But there's one more little piece I have to tell you because they say things like this happen in threes. So I was single. It was about maybe 15 years after I divorced. And I'm like, gotta think for a minute. Oh, there's a crisis in our family. My parents are older now. They're in their condominium down in Florida. My dad has Alzheimer's. My mom is severely depressed. So my 2 younger sisters and I fly down to Florida, and our mission is to get my parents home safe, and then we have to deal with all the stuff in the condo. So we go, and it was very stressful, I have to tell you. It was very stressful because everybody was kind of on edge. The sisters weren't getting along all that well. So I thought, I'm taking a barefoot walk on the beach. So I go for my walk, and I find myself talking to God, talking to the universe. I know you don't have any giant cecropia moss flying around, but I need something. I need something to keep me strong. So just a few minutes later, I go, ouch! I step on something sharp. I look to see if my foot is bleeding, and right in front of me is this little piece of driftwood. I pick it up, and I look, and I go, oh my God. It is the very same size, the very same shape as that cocoon that the giant cecropia moth came out of. I just like, thank you. I go back to the condo. I show my sisters, they know my story anyway, about the moth. And we all agree that we're all gonna get along and we're all gonna accomplish this mission, which we did, got my parents home safe. And like I said, that was about like 15 years after the divorce. And I went 18 years. And after 18 years, I remarried a longtime friend that had lost his wife a couple years earlier. I retired, and I'm so happy. I'm happy. I'm a happy wife, a mom, a momo, a sister, and an artist. And what I make is I hand build in clay, and I make insects of all different sizes that fly. So, my childhood that began like this, and I become this today. Thank you.
This will never do. Oh, there we go. I forgot to mention after Tom's story that we're actually going to be posting a photo of his father's watch and ring on social media. We're also going to be posting photographs of Maureen's
Picture with my moth.
thank you, girl. Picture with her moth. Yeah, all sorts of goodies. All sorts of goodies after tonight.
The driftwood.
The driftwood. I got you. All right. So our next storyteller is an internationally syndicated cartoonist. His work has actually even been up to space in a space shuttle. He is a frontman of a band. He's a writer, a 2-time TEDx speaker. When he's not busy doing any of that, he's trying to perfect his French. I barely do my dishes and have a tenuous grasp on the English language, so this guy, yeah, puts me to shame. Please welcome to the stage Mr. Jeff Koterba.
August of 1978. I'm 17 years old, and I'm standing in my parents' front yard waiting for a thunderstorm. Normally, I'd have long, wispy, dark hair, but because my hair is always blowing around, I've recently made the bad decision to get a perm. Now my mom is always teasing me that I look like Greg from the Brady Bunch. The other bad decision I've made, waiting outside for a thunderstorm. Our small house is located in South Omaha, not far from here, actually. Inside, my parents and 4 younger siblings are probably watching TV. Our house is filled with TVs because my dad is a part-time TV repairman. Every room in the house has stacks of TVs in various states of disrepair. Some are blaring, others flickering like lightning. My dad's also a drummer, so in the middle of all that, in the middle of all those TVs, in the middle of the living room, he's always banging on his drums. It's chaos. And I'm always looking for ways to escape. So sometimes I go hide out in my bedroom where I'm drawing cartoons. Other times I go outside, and I especially love watching bad storms. It's a Saturday night. I've just showered, so now I'm damp and barefoot in the front yard. In the west, the clouds are churning and swirling, and there's the hint of lightning. Ooh, the promise of a bad storm. My dad pops his head out from the front porch. He's all worried. "Storm's coming, kid. Better get inside." But I stand tall, and I shrug. I say, "I'm all right. I'm not worried." He goes back inside, closes the door. Everything is still. Everything is quiet. And so I wait. And I wait. And then, blam! A gun goes off in my head. A white ball of bright light blinds me. I've been struck by lightning. The lightning is surging through me. The lightning is in me. I'm in the lightning. The lightning and I, we are one and the same, and I am dying. I also see all these crazy, wild colors. I don't know if that's the lightning or my own brain going haywire, but what does it matter? Because I'm on the ground and I am dying. I can't move. I'm paralyzed. I'm like in a dream when you can't run away from the bad guy, you know? I also see a really big, weird head. The head reminds me of an alien I once saw in an old episode of The Twilight Zone. Or maybe it's God. Or maybe it's both. Time comes to a dead stop. My life does not flash before my eyes. I am calm. And it feels as though I've been in the fetal position on the ground for hours, days, weeks. I have one dying wish: to go inside the house, to die on the floor of the house before the rain comes. But again, I can't move. And then slowly, I'm on my knees. And then slowly I rise up. And then slowly I begin to walk. I'm like that image of the stages of evolution. Finally, somehow, I get to the front door of the house. But the door doesn't make any sense to me. My brain's all still scrambled. The door handle is a strange thing. I know that it means something. I know that it is significant. I know the door handle should do something, but I don't know what to do with the door handle. At that moment, a man comes out, and he grabs me, and he's shaking me, and he's slapping my face, and a woman is there, and the woman is screaming, "He looks Greg! He looks Greg!" Who's this woman calling me Greg Brady. But then I realize it's my mom, and she's not saying that I look like Greg. She's saying that I look gray. And of course, that's my dad. My dad shaking me, trying to bring me back to life. My mom is screaming again, we need to get him to the hospital. We need to get him to the hospital. But my dad says no. Instead, my parents lead me into the house. They sit me down on the couch. Outside, the storm is raging. The thunder's crashing. The lightning's flashing. The rain's pouring. I can't speak. I have no voice. My 4 younger siblings surround me, staring at me, trying to figure me out. I'm trying to figure them out. My mom, again, is pleading with my dad, please, please, we need to get him to the hospital. But again, my dad says no. Instead, he says, I'm going to give him a shot of my medicine. I'm 17 years old. I've just been hit by lightning, almost died, and now my dad is forcing me to drink my first shot of Jack Daniel's whiskey. In the days and weeks following the lightning incident, everything feels weird. The whole world just feels off. It feels like I'm walking sideways, still teetering between life and death. At the start of my senior year of high school, 3 things happened. 1, I can't wait to tell my friends that I was hit by lightning. But when I do, they point to my permed hair and laugh and joke and think I'm just making an excuse as to why my hair looks that way. Number 2, I draw my first cartoon for my high school newspaper, the Omaha South High Tutor. I've always wanted to be a published cartoonist, and I'm thrilled. 3, it had always been in the back of my mind that I should become a Catholic priest. I grew up Catholic, and my mom was always saying that, well, it's the obligation of every young Catholic man to consider the priesthood. And now more than ever, I am thinking about it. I'm even thinking of leaving Omaha South and finishing high school at a seminary in Minnesota. Now, can I say, is there a connection between the lightning strike and my wanting to become a priest? I don't know, maybe. That big head I saw, was that God? In that moment when I was struck by lightning, in that moment, was I somehow reborn? Did I now owe my life to the Lord? But as time goes by, thoughts about the priesthood don't make me feel alive. But when I draw cartoons, cartooning makes me feel more alive than ever. I don't know, maybe that big head was God, but maybe God was telling me not to become a priest, but to become a cartoonist. And all those crazy wild colors I saw, I don't know, maybe that just meant that I was to become an artist. Or I don't know, maybe it came down to that first shot of whiskey. Whatever it was that helped me decide I chose to live and I chose to become a cartoonist. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. All right, our next storyteller. She is the co-owner of Bad Seed Coffee and Supply, along with her husband, Matt. They are the proud parents of 2 toddlers, and she's currently working on a series of books about alien mermaids. Right? All right, please welcome to the stage, Brenna McCune.
Thank you.
Is that better?
Great. Growing up, the youngest of 4, I am a self-proclaimed horse of a different color, odd man out, black sheep. You get the picture. My mom worked at a veterinary clinic where she was bringing home reject and latchkey animals every chance that she had. So it was very natural to get used to taking care of these pets. Over the years, we had a handful of dogs. dogs, numerous cats, a couple of guinea pigs, a bird with no feet, a hamster, and the list does go on and on. But there were a couple in there that I grew to have a very special bond with, and I was a natural animal lover. So as I grew up and moved out on my own for the first time and had my own apartment, I got settled and knew that I wanted to have a pet of my own. I knew I didn't want to have a cat or a dog because it was a little bit too much responsibility for where I was in life. And I thought, I'm kind of a quirky, charismatic person. I need to find that pet that has that same quality. So I set out to the pet store knowing that when I would see it, it would call to me. And I was walking up and down the aisles, and I was going by the fish tanks, and I came to the last tank on the bottom, which wasn't full of water, but was instead full of hermit crabs. Now, it was a pile of kind of the regular hermit crabs we're used to seeing, but then in the very back of the tank, there was a fist-sized hermit crab with a tie-dye shell painted with a palm tree. I looked around waiting for everyone else to be like, yes, this is the pet you need. But instead I tracked down a pet store employee. He gave me a crash course. We got the tank, wood chips, a little warmer, a habitat for him to hide underneath, a little sponge for him to drink from because they can't drink from standing water, a little bit of like some crab pellet food, and then he encouraged me to offer peanut butter and crushed up saltines as kind of a special treat. So they put my new hermit crab in his tie-dye shell with a palm tree into a little box, and I headed home to my first apartment to get him all settled in. Now, I was a little apprehensive, and so after I got everything set up, I slowly opened the box and pulled him out and held him up in my hand. He immediately emerged, and we kind of just stood there staring at each other, sizing one another up. He had an immediate kind of calm, docile energy, but he also kind of had this like stuffy British energy. So I named him Edgar, is what came to me in that moment. And Edgar and I became very fast friends. So every morning we developed this little routine where as I was getting ready for work, I would fill the sink with just a little bit of water, and he would drag himself around, and I would do my makeup, my hair, pick out my outfit. He would chirp ever so quietly if you got up early enough to hear him. He loved sleeping under his habitat on his little warming pad. That's where he spent most of his time. Every few days, I had to mist his tank to keep it nice and humid and comfortable. And we carried on, just becoming great companions. Now, around this same time, I started what I would consider my first serious romantic relationship with a terrible boyfriend. Now, at the time, I didn't know he was terrible because I was 19 and ignoring a lot of red flags like you do when you're 19. But we had begun spending a lot of time together. While all of this was occurring, lots of people who would listen to me talk about my pet hermit crab, Edgar, with the tie-dye shell and the palm tree, would start offering up advice. I never realized how many people knew about hermit crabs, but they would tell me that despite the name hermit crab, they are in fact colony animals, and they like to live in groups. They like to have a companion. And I thought, well, I'm Edgar's companion. He doesn't seem lonely. And I would just kind of say, oh, sure, not yet, I'm not ready. And so I would spend time with this terrible boyfriend. I would hold Edgar in my hands, and I could put one in front of the other, and he would walk along ever so casually. And I continued on, just discovering my independence, going through the rites of passage of being a young adult on my own. Well, finally, after about 7 or 8 months, I was feeling pretty confident as a hermit crab owner. And I thought maybe I could get another one. Now, one of the things about hermit crabs is that they shouldn't be with varied sizes. They need to be with equal-sized hermit crabs. Otherwise, they will try to establish a hierarchy of either attacking each other, establishing dominance, taking shells, so on and so forth. So if I was going to get another crab, I had to find another fist-sized hermit crab. So over the next coming weeks, I would stop at a different pet store, wander around. It was just the small hermit crabs. I'd move on. But one fateful day, I walked into a PetSmart on 72nd, And I walked straight back to the hermit crab tank, and lo and behold, was a fist-sized hermit crab with a bright yellow shell painted with a skull and crossbones. I ignored the red flag and said, I'm gonna take him home. So I get him in his little box, I head home, I'm like, I'm really doing it, I'm gonna have 2 huge hermit crabs, like how weird is this? And I get home and I know I want this little routine where I'm gonna get him out, we're gonna size each other up. Eventually I'll introduce them to each other. So when I got Edgar, I had done this one particular test that I now was going to do with this second hermit crab, Toby. With Edgar, I had taken him out, grabbed his shell and tilted him back because I was kind of curious, like, what is in there? And he very gently would lean forward and expose, it's kind of like a shrimp tail, like a very long, creepy, soft body. And it showed to me a lot of trust. Additionally, I was really tempted by that big claw to know, like, how intense is that claw? And there's little hairs in it. And so I had tickled those hairs with a yellow pencil, and Edgar had very delicately clomped down on it and then let go. And it just left a few slight indentations in the pencil. So when I was getting Toby home and I was very much preparing to get to know him, I took him out of the box and I placed him in my hand, and he immediately shot back up into his shell. And I thought, okay, he's a little nervous, that's to be expected. But then as I tried to coax him more and more, he wouldn't tip forward. Every time I did that, unlike Edgar, who would lean forward for me, he would retreat further and further into the shell. Finally, when I got him in the sink with a little bit of water and he was pulling himself around, I was willing to handle him some more, and I did the pencil test. So I put the pencil in the claw and he snapped it in half. And I just thought, it's fine. He is not the shell that he's in, this skull and crossbones. Like, he just needs time to get settled. It's the animal kingdom. They will work it out. And so I slowly started introducing them to each other. And finally, I had gotten Toby into this tank, and they really wouldn't go near each other, which broke my heart. And I kind of just let time pass. I would make sure they got separate water and snacks, those types of things. And so every night, Edgar would go sleep under his little habitat over the warming pad. And Toby had been sleeping out in like the common area. There was one morning I woke up and Edgar was sleeping in the common area and Toby was in the habitat. And that really sat wrong with me because this was Edgar's home and he was sharing it, and you need to be a respectful roommate. Ideally, they would sleep together in the habitat, but this bond just wasn't forming. And I realized now my gut was kind of telling me like the chemistry is not there, but I just thought like it will work itself out. I know what I'm doing. I love these hermit crabs. I love Edgar, and I'm getting to know Toby. So I just went along with it. Now, I had had Edgar for probably 8 or 9 months. I was probably 5 or 6 months into this romantic relationship with the terrible boyfriend. And at this point, I'd probably had Toby 3 to 4 weeks. And so me and this terrible boyfriend lived maybe 5 or 6 blocks from each other. So we spent a lot of time coming and going between each other's apartments. You know, it took maybe 3 minutes to drive across. So one day I had been hanging out over there and I bid him farewell and I headed home. And I went bounding up the stairs to my apartment, and I opened the door, and the tank is on a bookshelf across from me. And as soon as I open the door, instantaneously, the tank just zooms in, and the room zooms out, like in that movie effect that they do. And inside the tank is chopped up hermit crab and an empty tie-dye shell with a palm tree. I'm devastated. I don't even stop to inspect. I run straight past into my bedroom. I'm heaving. I can't catch my breath. I'm crying. I'm muttering, Edgar, Toby, I don't even like Toby, you know, Edgar's dead. And trying to just make sense of the scene that I could barely bring myself to look at again. So as I'm crying on my bed with the murder scene right outside my bedroom, I call this terrible boyfriend and I do more of the Edgar, Toby, I didn't want Toby, Edgar's dead. And he presumes that his presence is needed. So we live very closely. He's there within a matter of minutes. I hear the front door open. I hear him come inside, and he comes in, and I imagine he starts rubbing my back or comforting me in some way. And I say to the effect, I don't want him anymore. I don't want him. He killed Edgar. Now, what I needed in that moment was someone to say, I understand. I'm going to clean up the tank. I'll call the pet store. I'll see if we can take him back. We can post on Craigslist. Like, I'm here for you. And instead, what he said was, you want me to take care of it? And for better or for worse, I said, yes. So he excused himself and went out, and I heard him shuffling around with the tank, and then I heard the back door close. I think at this point I'm starting to compose myself. I'm starting to process a little bit what happened, and I'm kind of realizing he's gone kind of a little too long. It kind of feels like 10, 15 minutes is passing, but I'm still just so grief-stricken that it's not really hitting me in a terrible way. And so he comes back up, empty-handed. The tank is gone. Everything inside of it is gone. And we kind of just start chatting or sitting together, and I finally say, what did you do? And he said in this very ominous way, do you really want to know? And I said, yes. So he tells me that he went down the back stairs, out into the alleyway, dumped out the terrarium, grabbed Toby in his yellow skull and crossbones shell, put him on the ground, and smashed him with a cinder block. Like I said, fist-sized hermit crabs. That's a big shell. It's a thick shell. I've never smashed a hermit crab, but I feel like it would take more than one heave with a cinder block. So then I start thinking, did he resent me? Was he smashing it over and over and maybe quietly crying to himself? Did he enjoy it? Were there chunks of crab flying up in his face? Was it like a scene from The Sopranos? It was horrible. And it made me really ponder who suffered more in that situation. I used to think this was a really funny story. It's gotten less funny as I've gotten older, but it got particularly less funny at one gathering where I was telling it to just one listener. And as I got through the whole story and the horrific ending, I very casually and absentmindedly said, you know, the really terrible thing is that hermit crabs can attack each other for shells. So maybe Edgar got fed up with Toby, killed Toby, and took his yellow skull and crossbones shell. And at that exact moment, me and this listener locked eyes as the crushing cinder block realization washed over us of what could have actually taken place. Had I calmed down or slowed down, done anything enough to pick up the surviving hermit crab and place it in my hand and tilt it back, I would have known immediately who was in that shell. But instead, judgment was passed. You know, there wasn't due process. There was no innocent until proven guilty. It's given me a lot to think about over the years, but especially that I myself have worn a lot of different shells over the years, and I too have been judged for a lot of those shells. You know, everything from psych ward at 17 years old to store manager for $1 billion corporation at the age of 21 shell. My personal favorite was living in a tent in a friend's living room while I was finding myself shell. Most recently, small business owner surviving a pandemic shell. So I'm just very grateful that despite the judgments that have been passed, nothing quite as dramatic as Edgar and Toby's fate. Time has gone on. The terrible boyfriend and I dated for 2 more years, too many. He became chronically ill towards the end of our relationship, and I became his caretaker, during which time he cheated on me with 3 separate people, emotionally and physically. So we did break up, and Within a matter of, I think, 6 months to a year, I had met someone else and we had started dating. And that person, Matt, is now my husband of 10 years this October. And we have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old who are both terrifying and brilliant. And I find that at this point in my life, I'm more of a tie-dye shell with a skull and crossbones. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenna. Thank you so much. Before I introduce our last storyteller to you, I just wanted to make you aware that our final event will be happening June 15th, which is also a Wednesday at 7:30. We'll be exploring the theme of home. So stories about where we come from, where we end up, and where we fit in. We'll have a whole new crop of storytellers for you to enjoy, so I hope you can join us just in a couple months. Crazy, it's just in a couple months. Already it'll be June. Was there anything else I wanted to tell you about? Yes, there is. If you feel like you want to pitch a story for a future event, I would love to hear from you. All you have to do is just email your pitch to me at musingomaha@gmail.com. It doesn't have to be about any particular theme. If you feel like you have a great story to tell that you want to have considered, please feel free to email me just a paragraph about what your story is about. Every pitch is going to be considered, and you might be selected to perform your story at a future event. So please reach out. All right, our last storyteller. She is the pop culture librarian at the Omaha Public Library. Cool job. She is also known, in her own words, to write letters but rarely send them. She dances at every opportunity. She's an excellent cook of Mexican food. She and her husband, Mohit, are the proud parents of a cat named Carlito and a dog named Bahira? Magira. All right. Please welcome to the stage the lovely Angela Fernandez.
A little lower. The year I turned 24, my entire life changed. It started with me living in Mexico with my cousin and my aunt and getting engaged to a sweet boy who loved music, movies, books, writing, and social justice in the ways that I did. It might have been a quick engagement, but we were in that kind of happiness that makes you forget about time. The problem was that I had already bought a ticket to move back to Florida because I wasn't making enough money. So we made a plan. I would go there, I would save some money, and then I would come back and we could be together. The plan didn't work out. Back in Florida, I lived with my mother and stepfather, worked in a library by day and a bookstore by night. On one of my shifts, I came in and there was a new employee, and I felt like I wanted to talk to her, so I went to buy something at her register. She immediately asked me if I wanted to hang out with her and her friend that night. I told her I had plans, and she said, "You'll have more fun with me." That was so bold that I canceled my plans and went with her. She was relentless in her pursuit of me, even though she knew that I was engaged. I had never dated a girl before, and I thought who I was attracted to should be something I understood at the age of 24. But I guess that wasn't my case. At this time, my grandmother got sick. I grew up living with my grandparents and my mother, and therefore my grandmother was like a second mother to me. She taught me how to multiply, how to play basketball, how to swim, bike, play the piano, amongst other things. She had 5 children and also called me her daughter. In a time before cell phones, she knew where we all were. We told her our entire lives like we were talking to our best friend. And she always greeted our stories with love and laughter and lack of judgment. That's so rare. At this time, I realized that I wasn't going to go back to Mexico. I was confused, and so I called the sweet guy, and I let him know that it wasn't going to work out, and I needed to figure all of this out. When we got to the hospital, it was clear that my grandmother's body was shutting down. It was time. All of her children were able to come see her from Mexico. She let us know that she'd lived a full life, and she signed a DNR. On one of my visits, she seemed sad, sadder than usual. And I said, I'll come back tomorrow. I just have to go into work. But shortly after I arrived for my shift, my cousin came in and unceremoniously let me know that our grandmother had died. As soon as I had left, she had started to struggle. And my aunt went calling for the nurses and said, she's not doing well. And they said, she signed a DNR. Do you want us to reverse it? And the weight of that decision gave her a heart attack. So she was moved to a different part of the hospital. That night, I stayed up with her while I mourned the death of my grandmother. Our family was in a very strange place. She was so much the glue that kept us together. My mother was so sad. She had started the process of selling her house, and so I decided that I was going to move in with the girl. One day, my mother asked me, "Are you two together?" I didn't say anything, but she could read me. She knew. She was so distraught. My mother was a very deep and accepting person, but sexuality was a very complicated topic for her. At the time, a lot of my friends were queer, and she said that she didn't understand, but she was trying. This was me, though. The sadness she felt compounded the depression she felt around the death of her mother. My mother and I were always incredibly close. We had a very deep connection, and we agreed ethically on almost everything. She would hand me her voting ballots and say, "Who should I vote for?" because she so trusted my judgment. This was too much for both of us, though, and she was angry and she was sad. My family blamed me for making her go through this while she was in mourning, but I hadn't even told her anything. I reacted in my 24-year-old self-righteous way. I got angry. I thought, I've been a great daughter. Why can't she just understand? I have to stand my ground. This is very important. She never rejected me directly or personally, but we argued a lot, and we spent a lot less time together. She would not come and see my first apartment because I lived with her. There was so much tension between us and sadness. But there was also love and kindness. One day she came to my job with a bottle of shampoo because she thought I would not buy the kind I needed living on my own. We reached out to each other, and we knew that we needed each other. One day, I took her to see the movie The Hours. I didn't know what it was about, but my mother loves Meryl Streep. There's a lot of lesbianism in The Hours. I was petrified. I thought she would think I did it on purpose, so I felt like I held my breath the entire movie. But then, when we got out, she said, "I liked it. It must be really hard for people who are actually gay." Bisexuality wasn't really a thing that she understood at the time, and honestly, it wasn't something that I really understood for myself either. But we went to coffee afterwards. We kept talking to each other, and at one point she said, "Angela, I know that I have to get there. I'm trying to grow." And this was so comforting to me, because how often can people see where they need to end up? And how often are they willing to do the work because they love you? My mother was going to Orlando with my stepfather, and we were supposed to go to coffee the day before, but I wasn't feeling up to it, so we said we'd go when she came back. I sent her some flowers because I knew they would make her feel happy, and she left me this voicemail that they brought her so much joy and they made her feel so special. At 4:00 in the morning, there was a knock on my door. My mother had died. In Orlando, unexpectedly, it just happened. My mother loved to tell the story of when I was born. She said when we first met, she held me and we stared at each other. We just looked into each other's eyes like we recognized each other. How would I ever recognize myself again? my entire life crashed before me. My mother had been the backbone to my soul. And I was so angry. How much had we fought in the past few months? How stubborn had I been? How much did we lose? My only comfort was the fact that I could not experience so much pain if I had not had the privilege of two such amazing mother figures. Many people don't get one, and I got two. My takeaways were really dark in the beginning. But eventually I realized the most beautiful part of our story is how much love we showed each other and how much kindness. I don't really think regrets are useful, but if I had something to contribute to this time in my life, it would be to be a little kinder to her, to be kinder to myself, and to trust that we would be okay. A little grace and compassion is what I gift 24-year-old me, and I keep the gratitude of having experienced that kind of love in the first place. Thank you.
Can we have a round of applause for all of our storytellers? Thank you. All right, well, that winds things up, wraps things up for Life and Death. Again, please join us on June 15th for Home Stories. You can visit us at www.bluebarn.org/musing for more information, or on Facebook and Instagram at Musing Omaha. I think I got everything. All right, you have a great night. Thank you so much for embracing storytelling.